People always say, family first. But what they don't tell you is that sometimes family can be the ones who hurt you the deepest. My name is Robert, and this is my wife, Catherine. We're here to tell you about the day our son tried to erase us from our own lives.
We raised him with everything we had, dear. Every opportunity, every advantage. Private schools, college, business connections. We thought we were building a legacy. But somewhere along the way, he learned to see us as obstacles instead of parents. And when he married Veronica, well, that's when things really changed.
Changed. Catherine, let's call it what it was. They wanted us gone. They wanted our money, our company, our properties, but they wanted us 6 feet under to get them. Or at least locked away in some forgotten nursing home where we couldn't embarrass them anymore.
What Robert isn't telling you yet is that we saw it coming. Not at first, no. At first, we made excuses. He's busy with work. She's adjusting to the family. Young people are just different these days. But a mother knows. A mother always knows when her child stops loving her.
And a father knows when his son starts calculating his inheritance before the old man's even cold. So here's what we're going to tell you today: how we fought back, how we protected everything we built, and how we taught them the most expensive lesson of their lives. Because sometimes, the only way to save your family is to destroy the illusion of one. Let me take you back to where it all started to fall apart. It was March 2019, and Catherine and I had just celebrated our 45th wedding anniversary. Small dinner, just the two of us, because our son Marcus was too busy to join. 3rd year in a row, but who's counting? We'd built Reynolds Construction from nothing. Started in 1978 with a single truck and a dream. By 2019, we had contracts across 3 states, 42 employees, and assets worth north of $8 million. Not bad for a kid from Brooklyn who barely finished high school and his wife who learned accounting from library books.
Robert always downplays it, but he was brilliant. Still is. He understood construction the way artists understand paint. And I kept the books cleaner than a hospital operating room. We were partners in every sense of the word. When Marcus was born in 1982, we promised ourselves we'd give him everything we never had. Education, stability, opportunities. Robert worked 16-hour days so Marcus could go to private school. I learned to survive on 4 hours of sleep so I could manage the office and still make it to his baseball games.
And you know what? He was a good kid. Genuinely good. Sweet, thoughtful, remembered birthdays, called his mother every Sunday. That lasted until he was about 35. Then he met Veronica at some charity gala, a woman who looked at our construction company the way a shark looks at blood in the water. She was beautiful, educated, sophisticated, everything we weren't. And she made damn sure we knew it.
The first time she came to our home, she walked through like she was touring a crime scene. Touched nothing. Sat on the edge of the sofa like she might catch something. When I offered her my homemade apple pie, the same recipe Marcus had loved his entire life, she smiled and said, "Oh, I don't eat refined sugar. It's basically poison, you know." That smile didn't reach her eyes. Not even close.
I should have thrown them both out right then. But Catherine gave me that look, the one that says, "Be patient, give them time." So I bit my tongue. Marcus looked uncomfortable, like he knew his future wife had just insulted his mother, but he said nothing. Absolutely nothing. That was the first warning sign. A man who won't defend his mother to his wife won't defend her to anyone.
They got married 6 months later. The wedding was a production, 300 guests, most of whom we'd never met. Veronica's family was old money, the kind that came from great-grandparents who'd made fortunes in railroads or banking or something equally distant from actual work. They looked at Robert and me like we were the hell. During the reception, Veronica's mother actually asked me if I'd gotten my hair done somewhere nice with this tone that suggested she knew I hadn't. I'd done it myself, same as I'd been doing for 50 years.
The real shift happened about a year after the wedding. Marcus had been working in the company since he graduated college, started in project management, worked his way up properly, learned the business from the ground up like I had insisted. But suddenly he started talking about modernizing and bringing the company into the 21st century. Now, I'm not against progress, but when your son starts every sentence with Veronica thinks or Veronica says, you know who's really running the show.
He came to Sunday dinner, which by then had become monthly instead of weekly, and announced that Veronica was pregnant. We were thrilled, of course. A grandchild. But before I could even finish hugging him, he added, "We're going to need the Heritage Street property for a proper home. The apartment's too small for a family." Heritage Street was a building we'd bought in 1985, prime real estate, worth maybe $2 million by then. We'd been using it for rental income.
I said, Marcus, that property generates $60,000 a year in rent. It's part of our retirement plan. And you know what he said? Dad, you and Mom have more than enough. Veronica grew up in a certain environment. Our child deserves the same. Deserves? Like Catherine and I didn't deserve to retire comfortably after 50 years of breaking our backs.
That's when I realized we'd lost him. Not to death, not to distance, but to entitlement. We'd worked so hard to give him a better life that we'd accidentally taught him to look down on the life that made it possible. I remember going to bed that night and telling Robert, we created a monster. He held my hand and said, "No, sweetheart. We created a good man who married a monster. There's still hope." But I wasn't sure I believed it.
We gave them the Heritage Street property. I know, you're thinking we were pushovers. But here's the thing about being a parent. You'll light yourself on fire to keep your children warm, even when they're the ones who struck the match. We transferred the deed to Marcus's name, told ourselves it was an early inheritance, convinced ourselves he'd appreciate the sacrifice. Veronica had it renovated before she was even showing. Gutted the whole place, spent another $500,000 making it look like something out of a magazine. Marble everything, designer furniture, a nursery that cost more than our first house.
The baby came in November 2020, a beautiful little girl named Sophia. We drove 3 hours to the hospital the moment Marcus called. But when we arrived, Veronica was in a private suite that looked like a hotel room, and there was a list at the nurse's station. An actual printed list of who was allowed to visit and when. We were scheduled for 30 minutes, 2 days after the birth, after her parents who'd been given unlimited access. Robert's hands were shaking when they handed us those visitor badges.
30 minutes with our first grandchild. 30 minutes scheduled like a dental appointment. And when we finally got into that room, Veronica lay there like a queen granting an audience. "Don't wake her up," she said before we even touched the baby. "The pediatrician says overstimulation is harmful for development." Catherine just wanted to hold her granddaughter, and this woman was quoting pediatricians like we didn't raise a child ourselves.
Marcus stood in the corner looking at his phone the entire time. I kept trying to catch his eye, to see some sign of the boy who used to crawl into my lap when he had nightmares, but he was gone. Replaced by this stranger in expensive clothes who couldn't even look at his own mother. When our 30 minutes were up, a nurse actually came in and said, "I'm sorry, but visiting hours for this party are now complete." This party. Like we were strangers. Like we were nobody.
We drove home in silence. 3 hours back, and Catherine didn't say a word. She just stared out the window with tears running down her face. That's when I decided, enough. I'd spent my whole life building, creating, providing. But I'd be damned if I was going to spend my final years begging for scraps of affection from my own son. I just didn't know yet how bad it would get before I could do something about it.
The next 2 years were a slow erosion of our relationship with Marcus. We saw Sophia maybe 6 times, always scheduled, always supervised, always with Veronica controlling every interaction like she was managing a focus group. "Don't give her that cookie, it has preservatives. Please don't use baby talk, it delays language development. I'd prefer if you didn't hold her like that." Every visit felt like a test we were failing.
Meanwhile, Marcus was making moves at the company. He'd bring in consultants who looked at our operation like it was a prehistoric relic. They talked about leveraging digital platforms and optimizing workflow efficiency. Fancy words for spending money we didn't need to spend to fix problems we didn't have. Our business worked. We had loyal clients, steady contracts, solid profits. But apparently, that wasn't good enough for Veronica's vision of what her husband should be running.
I need you to understand something. Robert and I weren't stupid or naive. We knew what was happening. We could see them positioning, maneuvering, waiting. The question was never if they'd try to push us out, it was when and how. So we started preparing. Quietly. Robert met with our lawyer, Daniel Whitmore, who'd been handling our affairs for 20 years. I started organizing files, gathering documentation, making sure every single thing we owned was properly recorded and protected.
That's when we discovered something interesting. Marcus had been made vice president 3 years earlier, and I'd given him signing authority on certain accounts to streamline operations. Turns out he'd been using that authority to quietly shift company resources. Nothing illegal, technically, but definitely questionable. Equipment purchases that went to properties he was developing on the side. Consulting fees to Veronica's friends. Small things, but they added up to about $130,000 over 2 years.
And then Robert found the loan application. Marcus had applied for a business loan using Reynolds Construction as collateral, $2.4 million. He'd forged Robert's signature on the preliminary documents. The bank had flagged it because the signature didn't match their records, which is the only reason we found out. When we confronted him, he didn't even look ashamed. He said, "I'm trying to grow the business, Dad. You're too conservative. This is how modern companies operate."
Modern companies? I built that business from nothing. I worked construction sites in the freezing cold and burning heat for 40 years. And my son, who'd never spent a single day doing actual manual labor, was going to lecture me about business operations? I told him right there in my office, "You're suspended. Effective immediately. No access to accounts, no signing authority, nothing until we sort this out." The look on his face, it wasn't remorse. It was rage. Pure, entitled rage that his father had dared to say no to him.
He left without a word, and 20 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Veronica, and I'd never heard her voice so cold. She said, "Catherine, I think you need to understand something. Marcus is the future of that company. You and Robert are dinosaurs clinging to relevance. If you push him out, you'll regret it. We have lawyers too, and they're much better than whatever small-town attorney you're using." She hung up before I could respond. I just sat there, holding the phone, shaking.
That night, Catherine and I sat at our kitchen table and made a decision. We had two choices: give in, let them slowly take everything we built and accept being sidelined in our own lives, or fight back with everything we had. We chose to fight. But we needed to be smart about it. Daniel Whitmore came to our house the next morning, and we spent 6 hours going through every document, every asset, every possible vulnerability. And we found several.
The company was structured as a partnership, with Robert and me holding 70% and Marcus holding 30%, shares we'd given him over the years thinking we were setting him up for eventual ownership. But the partnership agreement had a clause Daniel had insisted on years ago: any partner attempting to defraud the company or act against its interests could be bought out at fair market value by the other partners. Marcus's forged loan application qualified. We could legally force him to sell his shares back to us.
But there was a bigger issue: the Heritage Street property. We'd given it to Marcus, yes, but we'd never properly filed a quitclaim deed. The property was still officially in our names in the county records. An oversight, maybe, or maybe some part of me had known better than to fully let go. That property was now worth $3.1 million, and Marcus and Veronica had borrowed against it $800,000 for renovations and furnishings. They thought they owned it. Legally, they didn't. Okay.
Before we made any moves, I tried one last time to reach my son. I called him and asked if we could meet for coffee, just the two of us, like we used to when he was younger. There was a long pause, And then he said, "Mom, I don't think that's a good idea right now. Veronica feels like you and Dad are trying to sabotage my career." Sabotage. That word hit me like a physical blow. I said, "Marcus, we're your parents. We love you. Can't we just talk?" And he replied, "Love isn't holding someone back from their potential. I have to go." The line went dead.
That was it for me. You can disrespect me. You can question my business decisions. You can even try to steal from me. But when you break your mother's heart, when you make the woman who sacrificed everything for you feel like she's the villain in your story, that's when the gloves come off. I called Daniel and said, "Draw up the papers. All of them. I want him out of the company, and I want that property back. No mercy."
Robert was angrier than I'd ever seen him, but I understood. A parent's love is supposed to be unconditional, but it doesn't mean you have to let yourself be destroyed. We'd given Marcus every chance to be reasonable, to remember who we were to him. He'd chosen Veronica and her toxic worldview over his own family. So yes, we were going to fight. But it broke something in me that it had come to this.
Daniel worked fast. Within a week, we had a complete legal package ready. First, a formal notice invoking the partnership buyout clause, requiring Marcus to sell his 30% stake back to us for $900,000, fair market value based on the company's assets and revenue. Second, a demand letter regarding the Heritage Street property, asserting our legal ownership and demanding they vacate within 60 days. Third, a cease and desist regarding the misuse of company funds, with documentation of every questionable transaction.
We decided to deliver the papers ourselves. Not because we wanted to be cruel, but because this deserved to be face-to-face. We drove to Heritage Street on a Saturday morning in April 2023. The house looked magnificent. All that money we'd indirectly paid for through the property had transformed it into something you'd see in architectural magazines. There was a new BMW in the driveway next to Marcus's Mercedes. Through the window, we could see expensive furniture, artwork on the walls. They'd built their dream life on our generosity, and now they were going to learn what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you.
Marcus answered the door in designer loungewear, coffee in hand, looking every bit the successful executive enjoying his weekend. When he saw us standing there with Daniel and a manila envelope, his expression shifted from surprise to immediate hostility. "What is this?" he said, not even a hello, not even acknowledging his mother. I handed him the envelope and said, "Read it. All of it. We'll wait." Veronica appeared behind him in silk pajamas that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage, took one look at the situation, and said, "You need to leave. Now."
I looked past her into the house, into the home we'd given them, and said, "Actually, Veronica, you need to read those documents very carefully. Because in 60 days, you're going to be the ones leaving." Her face went white, and for the first time since I'd met her, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Marcus was already reading, his face getting redder with each page. "You can't do this," he said, his voice shaking. "This is my company too. That's my house."
I'll never forget what I said next. I looked my son in the eye and replied, "No, Marcus. It's my company that I built with my hands and my wife's brilliance. It's my house that I bought with money I earned. You've been living on borrowed generosity, and the loan just came due. You tried to forge my signature, you stole from the business, and worst of all, you treated your mother like she was nothing. So no, you don't get to keep pretending you earned any of this."
Veronica recovered quickly, her face hardening into that mask of superiority she wore so well. "We have lawyers," she said. "Very expensive ones. You're going to regret this." Daniel stepped forward then, calm as could be, and said, "Mrs. Reynolds, I've been practicing law for 30 years. Your lawyers can review these documents and they'll tell you the same thing I'm telling you now, you don't have a case. The property is legally theirs, the partnership agreement is ironclad, and the documentation of misused funds is extensive. You can fight this if you want, but you'll lose and it'll cost you whatever money you have left."
Marcus looked like he might actually cry. Good. I wanted him to feel a fraction of what he'd made his mother feel every time he canceled a visit, every time he prioritized Veronica's opinions over his parents' feelings, every time he made us feel small and irrelevant. "Dad," he said, and his voice cracked. "Please, we can work this out. I made mistakes, but I'm your son. You can't just throw me away." And Catherine, my beautiful, heartbroken Catherine, said the words that needed to be said.
I looked at my son and said, "Marcus, we're not throwing you away. You threw us away the moment you decided we were obstacles instead of people. The moment you let your wife treat us like servants. The moment you forged your father's signature and stole from the business we broke our backs to build. You made these choices. We're just responding to them." My voice was steady, but inside I was shattering. This was my baby, the child I'd carried, the boy I'd raised, and I was watching him reap what he'd sown.
Veronica's mask slipped completely. She stepped forward, pointing her finger at Catherine, and screamed, "You bitter old woman! You're just jealous that your son found someone better than you. Someone educated, someone refined, someone who isn't a glorified secretary pretending to be a businesswoman." The venom in her voice was shocking, but what shocked me more was that Marcus didn't stop her. He just stood there, letting his wife verbally assault his mother.
I took a step back, and Robert moved in front of me instantly, protective as he'd always been. Veronica kept going, her voice getting louder and more hysterical. "You want to take everything from us? Fine. But Marcus is your only child. You take our home, you destroy his career, and you'll never see your granddaughter again. Ever. We'll move across the country if we have to. Sophia won't even remember you exist."
That was the moment I truly hated her. Not disliked, not disapproved of, hated. She was using my granddaughter as a weapon, threatening to erase us from Sophia's life because we dared to protect what we'd built. I looked at Marcus and said, "And you're going to let her do this? You're going to let her weaponize your daughter against your parents?" He looked down at the ground, couldn't even meet my eyes, and that told me everything I needed to know.
We left without another word. There was nothing more to say. Daniel had served the papers, they'd been warned, and now the legal process would unfold. As we drove away, I watched that beautiful house disappear in the rearview mirror and thought about all the times I'd imagined visiting, playing with Sophia in that yard, making memories in that home. All of it gone. Not because we wanted it to be, but because our son had chosen a woman who valued property over people.
The next 60 days were hell. Marcus hired lawyers, expensive ones, just like Veronica promised, and they tried everything. They challenged the partnership agreement, claiming Marcus had been coerced into signing it years ago when he was young and naive. He'd been 28 and had his own lawyer review it. They claimed we'd verbally promised them the Heritage Street property, making it a legal gift we couldn't take back. We had documentation proving otherwise. They even tried to claim we were mentally incompetent due to our age and were being manipulated by Daniel. That one actually made me laugh.
While the lawyers battled, Marcus launched a smear campaign. He told anyone who would listen that we were cruel, vindictive, that we'd always favored money over family, that we were senile and being controlled by a greedy attorney. Some people believed him, people who didn't know us well, who saw a young couple with a baby and assumed we must be the villains. But our real friends, the people who'd known us for decades, who'd seen us build everything from nothing, they stood by us.
The court hearings were brutal. Marcus's lawyers tried to paint us as heartless tyrants destroying our son's life over minor disagreements. Our lawyers presented the forged loan documents, the misused company funds, the detailed timeline of Marcus's attempts to push us out. The judge, a woman in her 60s who'd probably seen 1,000 family disputes, listened to everything with an expression that gave nothing away. When Marcus's lawyer finished his emotional speech about elderly parents who couldn't let go, she looked at the evidence and said, "Counselor, your client committed fraud. Let's not pretend this is about hurt feelings."
The ruling came down in August 2023. The court upheld the partnership buyout. Marcus had to sell his shares for $900,000, payable over 3 years. The Heritage Street property was legally confirmed as ours, and Marcus and Veronica had 30 days to vacate. The misused funds had to be repaid with interest. Marcus could keep whatever money he'd already paid himself in salary, but his employment with Reynolds Construction was terminated effective immediately. It was everything we'd asked for, and it felt like the emptiest victory in the world.
We didn't celebrate. How could we? We'd won, but we'd lost our son in the process. Catherine cried for days after the ruling. Not tears of joy or relief, but grief. We were grieving a relationship that had died, a future with our granddaughter that would probably never happen, the family we thought we'd have in our golden years. People congratulated us on standing up for ourselves, but they didn't understand the cost.
Marcus and Veronica moved out of Heritage Street on a cold September morning. We weren't there. We hired a property manager to oversee it and document everything. They left the house in surprisingly good condition, probably because their lawyers had warned them that any damage would give us grounds for additional claims. The BMW and Mercedes disappeared from the driveway, replaced by a moving truck. Neighbors told us Veronica was crying, that Marcus looked like he'd aged 10 years in 2 months. I wish I could say I felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired.
We put the Heritage Street property up for rent. Within 2 weeks, we had a lovely young family move in, a doctor and a teacher with 2 kids. They sent us a thank you card saying how happy they were to find such a beautiful home. The rent covered our property taxes and gave us a comfortable cushion for retirement. Marcus and Veronica, meanwhile, moved into a much smaller rental in a less desirable neighborhood. According to mutual acquaintances, Veronica was devastated by the downgrade. Good. Maybe living in reality for once would do her some good.
The hardest part was Sophia. For her 3rd birthday, we sent a card and a gift, a handmade quilt I'd spent weeks making, with her name embroidered in the center. It came back unopened, with return to sender written in Veronica's distinctive handwriting. That's when I realized we might never see our granddaughter again. Marcus had made his choice, and Sophia was the collateral damage. Some nights, I'd lie awake wondering if she'd remember us at all, if she'd grow up hearing lies about who we were.
I wanted to take legal action for grandparents' rights, but Daniel advised against it. You'll spend a fortune for maybe supervised visits a few times a year, he said, and every interaction will be hostile. Is that what you want for Sophia? To grow up watching her parents and grandparents fight in courtrooms? He was right, but it didn't make it hurt any less. My granddaughter was out there, growing up, and I was missing it because my son was too proud to admit he'd married a monster.
But here's what we did do. We set up a trust fund for Sophia. $200,000, locked until she turns 25. We wrote her a letter explaining everything, our side of the story, copies of the legal documents, proof of Marcus's fraud and Veronica's threats. We told her that no matter what she'd been told about us, we loved her. That we'd always wanted to be part of her life. That when she was old enough to understand, she could make her own decisions about who we were. The trust and the letter are held by Daniel's firm, with instructions to contact Sophia directly when she reaches 18.
Life moved on, because that's what life does. Catherine and I restructured Reynolds Construction, bringing in a professional management team to handle day-to-day operations, while we gradually transitioned toward retirement. Without Marcus's expensive modernization schemes, the company actually became more profitable. We landed 3 major contracts in 2024, grew our workforce to 52 people, and increased our annual revenue by 18%. Turns out the old dinosaurs still knew a thing or two about running a business.
We also started traveling, something we'd talked about for years but never made time for. Italy in the spring, Ireland in the summer, a cruise through the Caribbean in the winter. We were finally living for ourselves instead of constantly trying to prove our worth to a son who'd decided we had none. It was liberating in a way I hadn't expected. We'd spent so many years building, providing, sacrificing, and now we were actually enjoying the fruits of our labor.
But I won't lie and say we were completely happy. There was always this hole, this absence where Marcus and Sophia should have been. We'd see families at restaurants, grandparents with grandchildren, 3 generations laughing together, and it would hurt. Catherine would get quiet for the rest of the evening, and I'd hold her hand, and we'd both pretend we weren't thinking about what we'd lost. The truth is, you can do the right thing and still grieve what it cost you.
Then, in March 2024, something unexpected happened. We received a letter. Not from Marcus, but from Veronica's mother, Patricia. She wrote that she needed to speak with us urgently, that it was about Sophia. My heart nearly stopped. Was she sick? Hurt? Had something happened? Patricia left her phone number and asked us to call. Robert wanted to throw the letter away. It's probably another manipulation, he said, but I couldn't. Not if it concerned our granddaughter.
I called Patricia the next day, and what she told us changed everything. Apparently, Marcus and Veronica's marriage was falling apart. The financial stress, the smaller house, the loss of status, Veronica couldn't handle it. She'd been having an affair with some investment banker she'd met at a charity event, and Marcus had found out. But here's the kicker. Patricia wasn't calling because she felt bad for Marcus. She was calling because she was worried about Sophia.
Patricia said that Veronica had become unstable, flying into rages, disappearing for days at a time, leaving Sophia with babysitters. Marcus was working 2 jobs trying to keep up with the lifestyle Veronica refused to downgrade from, and Sophia was being raised by whoever was available. I've tried to help, Patricia said, but Veronica won't listen to me. She's always been stubborn, but this is different. She's self-destructing, and Sophia is suffering for it. I know you have no reason to help, after everything that's happened, but I'm asking you to consider your granddaughter.
My first instinct was to tell Patricia exactly where she could shove her request. This was the woman who'd looked down on us from day one, who'd raised a daughter, who thought she was better than everyone else, who'd sat silent while Veronica threatened to erase us from Sophia's life. Now she wanted our help. Now she cared about our granddaughter's well-being? The hypocrisy was stunning. But Catherine put her hand on my arm, and I knew what she was thinking.
Sophia was innocent in all of this. A 4-year-old girl didn't deserve to be caught in the crossfire of adult dysfunction just because we were angry at her parents. I told Patricia we'd think about it and call her back. Robert was furious with me for not hanging up immediately, but I reminded him of something. We'd fought so hard to protect what we'd built, but what were we building it for if not for family? Even broken, complicated, painful family.
We spent 2 days debating what to do. Finally, we called Daniel and asked what our options were. He said that if Marcus and Veronica's marriage was as troubled as Patricia described, and if Sophia was being neglected, we could potentially file for emergency custody or at least formal visitation rights. But it would mean reopening all the wounds, going back to court, fighting Marcus again. Catherine looked at me and said, "Or we could try something radical. We could call our son."
I drafted a letter first, thinking written words would be safer than a phone call. I wrote about how we'd heard about his marriage troubles, how we didn't want to interfere or judge, but how we were worried about Sophia. I wrote that despite everything that had happened, he was still our son, and Sophia was still our granddaughter. I wrote that maybe it was time to find a way forward, not backward, but forward. Something new, something honest. Robert added a paragraph at the end. Your mother and I aren't perfect. We made mistakes too. But we never stopped loving you. Not for 1 second.
We sent the letter to Marcus's rental address, then waited. Days passed with no response, then a week, then 2 weeks. Catherine checked the mailbox every day like she was waiting for a college acceptance letter. I kept telling her not to get her hopes up, that Marcus's pride probably wouldn't let him respond. But I was checking my phone constantly too. Hope is a stubborn thing, even when you know better.
The call came on a Wednesday evening in early April. My phone rang with an unknown number, and when I answered, I heard the voice I'd been missing for over a year. Mom? It was Marcus, and he sounded broken. Absolutely broken. Mom, I don't even know where to start. Everything's falling apart. Veronica filed for divorce. She wants full custody. She's telling her lawyer that I'm financially unstable, that I can't provide properly for Sophia. Mom, I'm so tired.
Catherine put him on speaker so I could hear. For the first time in years, Marcus wasn't defensive or hostile. He was just defeated. He told us everything: how the marriage had been crumbling for months, how Veronica blamed him for their reduced circumstances, how she'd been emotionally abusive and neglectful toward Sophia, how he'd been working himself to exhaustion trying to fix things that couldn't be fixed. "I was so stupid," he said, "about everything. About the company, about the house, about you and Dad. I let her poison me against you."
I wanted to say, yes, you were stupid, you hurt us terribly, you chose her over us. But when I opened my mouth, what came out was, Marcus, we're here. Whatever you need, we're here. Robert looked at me like I'd lost my mind, but then Marcus started crying, actually crying, and said, I don't deserve your help. I don't deserve anything from you. But Sophia, she needs stability. She needs family. I can't do this alone anymore.
And there it was. The moment where we had to decide what kind of people we were going to be. We could hold on to our justified anger and let our son and granddaughter suffer, or we could be bigger than our hurt. I thought about all those years of building the company, all those decisions about whether to take the easy path or the right path. This was just another one of those decisions. "Marcus," I said, "come home. Bring Sophia. We'll figure this out together."
3 days later, Marcus pulled into our driveway in a beat-up Honda Civic with Sophia in a car seat in the back. The Mercedes was long gone, sold to pay legal bills. He looked older, thinner, exhausted. But when Sophia saw us through the window, she pointed and said, "Grandpa? Grandma?" She remembered us. After all this time, after everything, she remembered us. I burst into tears right there on the front porch.
That first afternoon was awkward and beautiful and heartbreaking all at once. Sophia was shy at first, clinging to Marcus's leg, but Catherine had baked chocolate chip cookies, the same recipe she'd made for Marcus when he was little, and the smell brought Sophia over to the kitchen. Within an hour, she was sitting on Catherine's lap, covered in cookie crumbs, chattering about her preschool and her stuffed animals, and everything a 4-year-old finds fascinating. Marcus sat at the table watching, and I saw tears in his eyes.
After Sophia fell asleep on the couch, exhausted from the emotional day, Marcus and I sat in the kitchen while Robert took out the trash. It was the first time we'd been alone in over a year. "Mom," he said, "I owe you an apology that I can't even begin to articulate. I was cruel. I was entitled. I let Veronica turn me into someone I despise. And the worst part is that I saw what was happening and I let it happen anyway because admitting you were right felt like admitting I'd failed."
When I came back in, Marcus looked at me and said, "Dad, about the company, about the house, about the money, you were right about all of it. I thought I knew better. I thought being educated and having an MBA made me smarter than a man who built a business from nothing. I was so arrogant. And now I'm 38 years old, divorced, broke, and I've destroyed my relationship with the only people who ever really loved me unconditionally." His voice cracked on that last word.
Robert sat down across from Marcus and said something I'll never forget. "Son, your mother and I fought for what we built because it mattered. But we didn't fight to punish you. We fought because you needed to learn that actions have consequences, that you can't just take and take without giving anything back. You're learning that lesson now. It's painful, but it's necessary. And now that you've learned it, we can move forward."
We talked until 2 in the morning, really talked, for the first time in years. Marcus told us about the slow deterioration of his marriage, how Veronica had become increasingly demanding and critical, how he'd realized too late that she'd never loved him. She'd loved what he represented, what she thought his family's money could provide. When that disappeared, so did her affection. He told us about Sophia's nightmares, about how she'd ask why Mommy was always angry, about how he'd lie awake terrified he was failing her the way he'd failed us.
The divorce proceedings were vicious. Veronica's lawyers painted Marcus as an unstable failure who'd stolen from his own family and lost everything. They conveniently left out the part where she'd encouraged him to take risks with company money, where she'd pressured him to forge those loan documents, where she'd been the driving force behind every terrible decision. Her lawyer argued she should have full custody, that Marcus couldn't provide a stable home for Sophia. That's when Robert and I made a decision.
We wrote a letter to the family court judge detailing everything. Marcus's employment with Reynolds Construction. We quietly rehired him at an entry-level salary. He needed to earn his way back up. Our relationship with Sophia, our financial stability, and our willingness to provide housing support to Marcus so he could maintain custody. We also included character references from our business associates, our pastor, and community members who'd known our family for decades. We didn't hide what had happened between us and Marcus. We owned it all, but we made it clear that families heal, and we were actively healing.
Veronica's lawyer tried to use our previous legal battle against us, arguing that we were controlling and vindictive. But our lawyer presented it as two parents protecting their life's work from fraud, and a judge who'd seen everything understood the difference. When Veronica took the stand and tried to paint herself as the victim, the judge asked her directly about the affair, about leaving Sophia with babysitters for days, about her documented substance abuse issues. Marcus had found bottles and prescription pills she'd hidden. She fell apart.
The final custody arrangement was beautiful in its justice. Marcus got primary custody, with Veronica getting supervised visitation every other weekend. Supervised because the court determined her lifestyle was unstable. Veronica had to complete parenting classes and substance abuse counseling before she could have unsupervised time. Child support was calculated based on both incomes, which meant Veronica actually owed Marcus a small amount each month. The look on her face when that ruling came down was something I'll remember forever.
Marcus and Sophia moved into our guest house, a small cottage on our property that we'd built years ago for visiting family. It gave them privacy and independence while keeping them close. Sophia flourished. She enrolled in a good preschool, made friends, and slowly started laughing again. She'd help me in the garden, follow Robert around while he worked on projects, fall asleep during movie nights with her head on her daddy's lap. She was healing, and so were we.
Marcus worked hard to rebuild his life and his reputation. He started at the bottom of Reynolds Construction again, working as a project coordinator, earning maybe 40% of what he'd made as vice president. But he showed up every day on time, did quality work, and slowly regained the respect of employees who'd watched his fall from grace. It wasn't easy for him. I'm sure some days he wanted to quit, to run away from the humiliation of reporting to people who used to report to him. But he stuck with it.
Watching Marcus be a father to Sophia without Veronica's interference was like watching a flower bloom. He was patient, attentive, playful in ways I hadn't seen since he was young. They had breakfast together every morning before preschool. He read to her every night. He went to every parent-teacher conference, every school event, every children's birthday party. He was becoming the man we'd always hoped he'd be, and it was happening because he'd lost everything and had to rebuild from scratch.
One night about 6 months after they moved in, Marcus and I were sitting on the porch while Sophia and Catherine made dinner inside. He turned to me and said, "Dad, I understand now why you fought so hard. It wasn't about the money or the property. It was about teaching me that nothing in life is free, that respect has to be earned, that love without boundaries is just enabling. I hated you for it at the time, but you saved me. If you'd let me keep going down that path, I'd have destroyed myself completely."
I remember coming out onto that porch and seeing my husband and my son sitting together in comfortable silence, watching the sunset, and thinking, we made it. We survived the worst thing that can happen to a family, betrayal from within, and we came out the other side. Not unchanged, not unscathed, but together. Robert reached for my hand, Marcus smiled at me, and through the window we could hear Sophia singing some nonsense song while she helped set the table. That moment, right there, was worth everything we'd fought for.
Then, in November 2024, we got news that changed everything again. Patricia called to tell us that Veronica had been arrested for DUI with her boyfriend's teenage son in the car. No one was hurt, thank God, but it was her second offense. The court immediately suspended all her visitation rights with Sophia pending a full custody review. Marcus was devastated, not for Veronica, but for Sophia, who'd have to grow up knowing her mother chose substances and men over being a parent.
Sophia asked why she couldn't see Mommy anymore, and Marcus told her a gentle version of the truth. Mommy is sick and needs to get better before she can take care of you properly. But you have Daddy, and Grandpa and Grandma, and so many people who love you. Sophia thought about this for a moment, then said, "Okay. Can we have pancakes for dinner?" Kids are resilient in ways that break your heart. They accept the unacceptable because they don't know any different.
By early 2025, our lives had settled into a new normal. Marcus had been promoted to assistant project manager at Reynolds Construction, not because he was our son, but because he'd proven himself capable. He was dating a woman named Sarah, a kindergarten teacher he'd met at Sophia's school, who was kind and stable, and everything Veronica wasn't. Catherine loved her immediately, which meant I loved her too. Sophia called her Miss Sarah, and would excitedly tell us about their weekend activities.
The trust fund we'd set up for Sophia sat untouched, growing with interest. We decided to revise our will, leaving the bulk of our estate to Sophia directly, with Marcus as trustee until she turned 30. The Heritage Street property would be sold after we passed, with proceeds split between Marcus's retirement and Sophia's education fund. Reynolds Construction would transfer to Marcus over the next 5 years, with strict oversight conditions until we were confident he could run it ethically. Everything we'd fought to protect would eventually go to our family, but on terms that protected everyone.
You know what I learned from all of this? That being a parent sometimes means being willing to be the villain in your child's story, so they can learn to be the hero in their own. Marcus hated us for a while, thought we were cruel and vindictive, and maybe in his version of events, we were. But sometimes love looks like boundaries. Sometimes love looks like consequences. Sometimes love looks like letting someone fall, so they can learn to stand on their own.
And I learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and reconciliation doesn't mean everything goes back to the way it was. Our relationship with Marcus is different now, more honest, less assumptive, built on mutual respect rather than unconditional accommodation. We love him, but we're not afraid to tell him when he's wrong. He loves us, but he understands we're not an endless resource to be exploited. It's healthier this way, even if it's harder.
As for Veronica, we heard through Patricia that she completed court-ordered rehab and was petitioning for supervised visitation again. Marcus was ambivalent. He wanted Sophia to know her mother, but he was also protective and wary. The court would decide, and we'd support whatever was determined to be in Sophia's best interest. Personally, I think Veronica represents everything wrong with a generation that mistakes aesthetics for substance, Instagram for reality, consumption for happiness. But that's just an old man's opinion.
The Heritage Street property is now rented to that lovely young family, and every month they send their rent check with a note thanking us for being such responsive landlords. They've repainted the nursery, planted a vegetable garden, and filled the house with actual warmth and laughter. It's everything we'd hoped it would be for Marcus and Veronica, a home, not just a showpiece. The irony isn't lost on us.
One afternoon in March 2025, I asked Marcus to take a walk with me through the old construction site where we'd started the business 47 years ago. It's a shopping center now, successful and thriving, but I can still see the empty lot where Catherine and I sat in our truck eating gas station sandwiches, dreaming about what we could build. Marcus had never really understood what it took to start with nothing. I wanted him to see where we'd begun.
While they were gone, Sophia and I made cookies again. It had become our tradition. She was tall enough now to stand on a stool and pour ingredients, her tongue sticking out in concentration just like Marcus used to do. She told me about her day at preschool, about a boy who'd pushed her on the swings, about how she wanted to be a doctor or maybe a princess, or maybe both. I laughed and told her she could be anything she wanted, and I meant it with my whole heart.
At the construction site, I told Marcus about the early days. How we'd taken out a loan we couldn't really afford, how we'd worked until our hands bled, how many times we almost gave up. I told him about the night Catherine cried because we couldn't make payroll and thought we'd have to let our first 3 employees go, and how we'd sold her engagement ring to cover it. I told him that I'd bought her a new ring 5 years later, bigger and better, but she'd never forgotten the sacrifice of that first one.
When they came back from their walk, Marcus hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "Mom," he said, "I never understood. I never even tried to understand. You and Dad built an empire from nothing, and I acted like I deserved to inherit it just for being born. I'm so sorry. I held his face in my hands and said, "You're understanding now. That's what matters." And I meant it. Growth counts even when it comes late.
That spring, we held a small party to celebrate Reynolds Construction's 47th anniversary. We invited employees, old clients, friends we'd made over decades in business. Marcus gave a speech about his parents, about how we'd taught him the hardest lesson of his life and saved him in the process. People cried. Catherine cried. Hell, even I got misty-eyed. And watching Sophia run around the yard with other kids, I thought, this is what we fought for. Not the money, not the property, but this moment. This family.
By summer 2025, Sarah had become a regular part of our family dinners. She was wonderful with Sophia, patient and creative and genuinely interested in being part of the child's life, not as a replacement for Veronica, but as an additional loving adult. Marcus seemed lighter around her, more like the boy we'd raised than the man Veronica had tried to mold him into. Robert and I started joking about when we'd get to plan a wedding, though we kept those jokes to ourselves mostly.
The business continued to thrive. We'd landed a contract for a major commercial development, our biggest project ever. Marcus was managing the initial planning phases, and he was doing brilliant work, combining the innovative thinking of his education with the practical wisdom he'd learned from us. It was the best of both worlds, and watching him present proposals to clients, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: pride in my son.
Veronica had completed her supervised visitation requirements and was petitioning for unsupervised weekend visits. Marcus met with her and her lawyer, and he told us later that she seemed genuinely changed, humbled, sober, taking accountability for her mistakes. We were skeptical, naturally, but Marcus wanted to believe in second chances. He'd been given one, after all. The court would decide in the fall whether she was ready for more responsibility.
One evening, Marcus came to us with a request that took us by surprise. He wanted to buy into Reynolds Construction again, not as a gift, not as an inheritance, but as a legitimate business investment. He'd been saving money, living frugally, and he wanted to purchase a 10% stake at fair market value. He wanted to earn his way back, to prove he understood the value of what we'd built. Catherine and I looked at each other, and I saw the same thought in her eyes. Our boy had finally grown up.
We agreed, with conditions. The purchase would happen over 2 years through payroll deductions and a formal contract. He'd earn his additional stake for performance. If the company hit certain revenue and ethics benchmarks under his management, he'd gradually increase his ownership to 25% over 5 years. After we passed, he'd have the option to buy out the remaining 75% at a predetermined formula price. It was fair, it was structured, and it protected everyone involved.
Patricia called in August with news that was somehow both predictable and shocking. Veronica's sobriety had lasted exactly 3 months after her supervised visits ended. She'd relapsed spectacularly, missing scheduled pickups with Sophia, showing up intoxicated to a parent-teacher conference, and ultimately crashing her car, thankfully alone, into a telephone pole. Her parental rights were formally suspended indefinitely, with reinstatement requiring 6 months of verified sobriety and completion of intensive therapy. Marcus was heartbroken for Sophia but not surprised.
Sophia, now 5 years old, took the news with a maturity that broke my heart. "Mommy's sick again?" she asked Marcus, and when he nodded, she just sighed like a tiny old woman and said, "Okay. When can Miss Sarah come over?" She was learning to protect herself emotionally, to not invest hope in someone who couldn't be reliable. I wished she didn't have to learn that lesson so young, but some lessons choose their timing, not the other way around.
Marcus asked us one night if we thought he damaged Sophia permanently by choosing Veronica, by bringing her into a situation that was always going to be unstable. I told him what my father had told me years ago. "Son, you can't live your life avoiding mistakes. You can only learn from them and do better next time. Sophia has you, she has us, she has Sarah, she has love and stability now. That's what she'll remember, not that her mother was sick, but that her father built her a good life anyway."
In September, Marcus proposed to Sarah. Nothing fancy, just the two of them on a walk with Sophia, who is apparently very excited to be the most important helper ever in giving Sarah the ring. Sarah said yes immediately, and when Marcus called to tell us, I could hear the joy in his voice, real joy, untainted by anxiety or obligation. This was right. This was what love was supposed to look like: steady, kind, built on mutual respect rather than image and status.
The wedding was set for April 2026, a small ceremony in our backyard with about 50 guests. Sophia would be the flower girl, of course. Sarah's parents were lovely people, both retired teachers, warm and welcoming, the kind of folks you'd want as in-laws. During our first dinner together, Sarah's mother pulled Catherine aside and said, "Your son is a good man. Whatever happened before, he's done the work to become someone worth loving." Catherine came home crying happy tears.
As fall turned to winter in 2025, our lives had a rhythm and peace I hadn't felt in years. Mornings, Robert and I would have coffee while watching Sophia play in the yard before preschool. Marcus would stop by the main house before work, discussing the day's projects with Robert while I made breakfast. Evenings, we'd often eat dinner together, all of us, this pieced-together family that had survived its own destruction and rebuilt into something stronger.
People ask me sometimes if I regret how hard we were on Marcus, if we could have handled things differently. My answer is always the same. I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret doing it. If we'd let Marcus continue down that path, enabled his entitlement and Veronica's toxicity, he'd be a much worse man today. Sophia would be growing up in chaos. We'd probably never have reconciled. Sometimes being a good parent means being a hard parent, and I make no apologies for protecting what we built with our blood and sweat.
But I also learned that being right doesn't exempt you from being compassionate. We were right to fight back, right to protect our assets, right to demand accountability. But we could have left the door open sooner, could have made it clear that consequences weren't the same as abandonment. Pride is a dangerous thing. Marcus's pride nearly destroyed him, but our pride could have prevented healing. I'm grateful we swallowed ours in time.
In December, we formally updated our estate plan. Reynolds Construction would transfer to Marcus over a 10-year period, with the first phase beginning immediately and full ownership completing in 2035, when he'd be 52 and we'd be in our 80s, if we lived that long. The Heritage Street property and our other real estate holdings would be placed in a family trust benefiting Sophia, with Marcus as trustee. Our retirement accounts and life insurance would be split between Marcus's security and Sophia's education fund.
But we also added something new, a family charter. It outlined not just financial distributions but values, how business decisions should be made, how family conflicts should be resolved, how the next generation should be taught about money and responsibility. It included the story of what happened with Marcus and Veronica, not to shame him, but as a lesson for Sophia and any future grandchildren about entitlement and consequences. Our lawyer said he'd never seen anything like it, but we weren't interested in normal. We were interested in preventing history from repeating itself.
Christmas 2025 was different from any we'd had in years. Sophia believed in Santa Claus, with the fierce conviction only a 5-year-old can manage. She left cookies and milk, wrote a letter asking for a specific doll and for my daddy to always be happy, and woke us all up at 6 in the morning to see if Santa had come. Marcus, Sarah, Catherine, and I sat around the tree watching her open presents, and I thought about the Christmas 3 years earlier when Marcus hadn't even called.
Sophia gave us handmade gifts she created at preschool, a painted picture frame for Robert with Best Grandpa in shaky letters, and a clay handprint for me with her name pressed into it. These cheap, imperfect gifts made by small hands were worth more than anything Veronica had ever owned, more than the Heritage Street mansion, more than any amount of money. This was wealth, this moment, this family, this love.
Marcus pulled me aside, while Catherine and Sarah were helping Sophia with a complicated toy assembly and said, "Dad, I want to tell you something. I know I've said I'm sorry 100 times, but I need you to know that I understand now what you and Mom gave up for me. I'm raising Sophia, and every day I make choices about her future versus my present comfort. And every day I think about how you made those choices for me for 18 years, and I never even said thank you."
Later that day, all of us, Robert, me, Marcus, Sarah, and Sophia, drove to the cemetery where my parents are buried. I wanted Sophia to see where her great-grandparents were laid to rest, to understand that family extends beyond who's currently living. We told her about how her great-grandpa had worked in factories, how her great-grandma had cleaned houses, how they'd come to America with nothing and built a life. Sophia listened with wide eyes and then said, "So we're a strong family?" Marcus squeezed her hand and said, "The strongest."
On New Year's Eve, Catherine and I watched Sophia fall asleep on the couch during a movie, her head on Marcus's lap, while Sarah sat beside them with her arm around his shoulders. The clock struck midnight, and instead of staying up celebrating, we were sitting in comfortable silence watching our family breathe. Catherine whispered, "We did good, didn't we?" And I kissed her forehead and said, "We did better than good. We survived, and we taught our son to survive too."
January 2026 brought bitter cold and a new challenge. Marcus's company-provided health insurance had lapsed during the transition of his employment restructure, and Sarah, as a teacher, had decent but not great coverage. They were looking at marriage for April, but they were worried about the gap period. Robert and I added them to our business insurance plan temporarily, not as a handout, but as part of Marcus's employment package. He tried to refuse at first, that stubborn pride again, but we reminded him that pride didn't treat broken bones or illness.
The commercial development project hit a snag in February. Permit issues with the city, contractor disputes, the usual headaches that come with large builds. Marcus handled it brilliantly, negotiating with city officials, finding compromise solutions, keeping the client informed and confident. This was the son we'd raised, the one who could solve problems instead of creating them. I told him I was proud, and he looked at me like I'd given him $1 million. Turns out fatherly approval was what he'd been chasing all along, not Veronica's expensive taste.
Wedding planning consumed Sarah and me through March. We spent hours looking at flowers, discussing menus, debating color schemes. She asked for my input on everything, genuinely wanted my opinion, treated me like family before she officially was. It was the relationship with the daughter-in-law I'd always wanted and thought I'd had with Veronica before everything soured. This time, I was more cautious, more protective of my heart, but also more hopeful. Sarah had proven herself through her actions, not her words.
Veronica sent a card in March, a birthday card for Sophia, with a long note about how she was working on herself, how she loved her daughter, how she hoped someday Sophia would understand. Marcus let Sophia open it, but he read the note first to make sure it was appropriate. Sophia looked at the card, said, "That's nice," put it on her bookshelf, and went back to playing with her dolls. No drama, no tears, just a child who'd learned to protect herself from disappointment. I felt both proud and sad for her.
The night before the wedding, I had a conversation with Sarah that I needed to have. I told her about everything, the full story of Marcus and Veronica, the ugliness, the betrayal, how we'd fought back. I told her about the pain of watching your child choose someone toxic, about the years of grief and estrangement. And I told her, "I'm not telling you this to scare you or warn you. I'm telling you this because I want you to know that we're not perfect, Marcus isn't perfect, and marriage to him means accepting his past while building something different."
The wedding day was perfect. April sunshine, our backyard transformed into something magical with white chairs and flower arches, 50 people who genuinely loved Marcus and Sarah. Sophia walked down the aisle throwing petals with serious concentration, and when she reached the altar, she turned and waved at us with a huge grin. Marcus cried when he saw Sarah in her dress. Not fancy, not expensive, but beautiful in its simplicity. This was real, this was right, this was what we'd hoped for him all along.
During the reception, Marcus gave a speech where he thanked everyone, but when he got to us, his voice broke. "Mom, Dad," he said, "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but you gave it anyway. I don't deserve a second chance, but you're giving me one. Everything good in my life right now exists because you loved me enough to let me fail and then loved me enough to help me stand back up. I hope I can be half the parent to Sophia that you've been to me." There wasn't a dry eye in the place.
Sarah's vows included a promise to Sophia that she'd never try to replace her mother, but she'd always be there as a friend, a guide, a safe person. Sophia stood next to her during this part, holding her hand, and when Sarah finished, Sophia whispered loud enough for the microphone to pick up, I love you, Miss Sarah. The crowd lost it. Catherine grabbed my hand so tight I thought she might break bones, but I didn't care. This was worth everything.
The party lasted until sunset. When we cut the cake and sent the happy couple off for a weekend honeymoon, Sophia was staying with us, thrilled about a sleepover at Grandma's house. As we cleaned up with the help of friends, I looked around at the remnants of the celebration, the flowers, the empty champagne bottles, the Polaroid photos pinned to a string, and thought about how far we'd come. From devastation to this. From broken to whole.
That night, after Sophia was asleep in the guest room and Catherine and I were getting ready for bed, she said, "Do you think we should have done anything differently?" I thought about it for a long time before answering. "Maybe," I said. "Maybe we could have been less harsh, or moved faster to reconcile, or something. But Catherine, we did the best we could with what we knew at the time. We protected what we built, we taught lessons that needed teaching, and we kept the door open when it mattered most. That's all any parent can do."
Summer 2026 brought new routines. Sarah had moved into the cottage with Marcus and Sophia, and she was adapting beautifully to instant motherhood. She and Sophia had developed their own traditions: Saturday morning pancakes, Wednesday afternoon art projects, bedtime stories with different voices for different characters. Marcus watched them together with a contentment I'd never seen in him, not even in his early days with Veronica. This was what partnership looked like when it was built on substance instead of status.
The commercial development project completed in July, on time and under budget. Marcus had managed the entire final phase, and the client was so impressed they offered us 2 more contracts for the following year. At the company's celebration dinner, I announced that Marcus was being promoted to executive project manager, with a significant raise and expanded responsibilities. Some of the older employees who'd been there during the drama looked skeptical, but most just applauded. He'd earned it fairly, and everyone could see the difference in him.
Sophia started kindergarten in September, and Sarah, being a teacher at the same school, made the transition seamless. They'd drive together, have lunch together sometimes, and Sophia would light up telling us about her day. Mom Sarah, says I'm really good at reading, she'd announce proudly. The transition from Miss Sarah to Mom Sarah had happened naturally, without force, and Marcus had cried the first time he heard it.
We received a letter from Veronica's lawyer in October. She completed 6 months of sobriety, was in intensive therapy, and wanted to petition for supervised visitation again. The letter was professional, formal, acknowledging past failures, and expressing genuine desire to be part of Sophia's life in whatever capacity was deemed appropriate. Marcus met with her in a neutral location with lawyers present, and he told us later that she seemed different, smaller, humbler, more honest about her limitations.
The court granted limited supervised visitation starting in November, 2 hours every other Sunday at a family visitation center. Sophia was nervous but curious. "Will Mommy remember what I look like?" she asked, and my heart broke a little. After the first visit, Sophia reported that Mommy cried a lot and said sorry a lot, and we played with dolls. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. Time would tell if Veronica could maintain it.
Christmas 2026 was bigger than the year before. Sarah's parents joined us, along with a few close friends who'd become like family over the years. Sophia was 6 now, old enough to help with cooking and decorating, bossy about where ornaments should go on the tree. She'd made gifts for everyone at school: painted rocks, friendship bracelets, cards with elaborate crayon drawings. The house was full of noise and laughter and chaos and love.
Catherine's health had been declining slightly, nothing serious, just the natural wearing down that comes with being in your mid-70s. Some joint pain, some fatigue, doctor's appointments becoming more frequent. She didn't complain, but I noticed. Robert noticed too, becoming more protective, insisting she rest more, take it easier. We'd started preliminary conversations about what full retirement might look like, about how much longer we wanted to actively run the business.
Marcus and I had a conversation about succession planning in January 2027. "Dad," he said, "I'm ready. Not to take over completely, but to start taking on more of the ownership responsibilities. You and Mom have earned your retirement. You've rebuilt the business, rebuilt our relationship, raised Sophia with us. It's time for you to rest. He was right, but letting go was harder than I'd expected. That business was my identity for 50 years. Who was Robert Reynolds without Reynolds Construction?
But Catherine was excited about retirement. She'd started planning trips Ireland, Scotland, New Zealand, places we'd always talked about but never made time for. She'd pulled out photo albums, started organizing decades of memories, talked about writing down family stories for Sophia to have someday. She'd started teaching Sophia to bake, passing down recipes that had been passed down to her. Legacy wasn't just about money or business, it was about these small traditions, these connections across generations.
We set a timeline. By January 2028, Marcus would assume controlling interest in Reynolds Construction, with us maintaining a minority stake and advisory roles. The official transition would happen over 12 months, with Marcus gradually taking over all major decisions while we were still available for consultation. It was terrifying and liberating at the same time. After 50 years, I was going to let go of the wheel and trust my son to drive. Given our history, that trust meant everything.
Spring 2027 brought unexpected news: Sarah was pregnant. Marcus called us from the doctor's office, barely coherent with joy, and we drove over immediately. Sophia was thrilled at the prospect of being a big sister, immediately making plans for teaching the baby everything important and demanding to know if it would be a girl because boys are sometimes weird. The due date was November, and suddenly our family was expanding in ways we'd only dreamed about.
The pregnancy progressed smoothly through summer, and watching Marcus and Sarah prepare for this baby was beautiful. They converted the small spare room in the cottage into a nursery, but not with expensive designer furniture like Veronica had insisted on. With practical pieces they'd chosen together, some new, some secondhand, all picked with thought and care. Sophia helped paint the walls, getting more paint on herself than the walls, and everyone laughed. This was what family looked like.
Veronica had maintained her sobriety and visitation schedule for over a year, a record that everyone acknowledged was significant. She'd graduated to unsupervised visits, for hours twice a month, and while Sophia was never quite comfortable with her, she'd stopped being afraid. "Mommy's trying really hard," Sophia told me once. "She says she wants to be better. I hope she can." Such wisdom from a 7-year-old who'd learned early that people are complicated.
In October, Catherine had a health scare, chest pains that sent us to the emergency room at midnight. It turned out to be a treatable heart condition, not a heart attack, but it reminded us that time wasn't unlimited. We were both in our mid-70s, healthy for our age but not immortal. The incident accelerated our retirement planning and made us more intentional about making memories with Sophia, with Marcus and Sarah, with the coming baby.
The baby came on November 15, 2027, a healthy boy they named Robert Marcus, after his grandfather and father. When Marcus told us the name, Robert cried for the first time since the day Marcus had come home broken and asking for help. To have his name carried on, after everything we'd been through, after coming so close to losing our son forever, it meant redemption, it meant healing, it meant our story had a happy ending after all.
Holding my grandson for the first time, this tiny person named after me, I thought about everything we'd survived to get to this moment. The betrayal, the legal battles, the estrangement, the slow, painful reconciliation. Every hard decision, every moment we'd had to be harsh instead of soft, every time we'd chosen principle over easy peace, it had led here. To this family, flawed and scarred but intact. To this moment of pure joy.
Sophia was the most attentive big sister imaginable, constantly checking on baby Robbie, bringing him toys he was too young to play with, singing him songs she made up on the spot. The cottage was chaos and beautiful, and Marcus and Sarah handled it with grace and humor. We helped where we could, bringing meals, watching Sophia when they needed rest, being present without being intrusive. We'd learned that lesson well.
By December 2027, the business transition was nearly complete. Marcus was running day-to-day operations, making decisions, managing the team. He consulted with me on major contracts, but more as a courtesy than a necessity. He'd become a true leader, respected by employees who'd seen his journey from entitled VP to humble coordinator to earned executive. The business was in good hands. More than that, it was in hands that understood the cost of building something, the responsibility that came with leadership.
Catherine and I booked our first big retirement trip for March 2028, 3 weeks in Ireland, the trip she'd always dreamed about. We'd leave the business to Marcus, leave Sophia and Robbie in their parents' capable hands, and actually live for ourselves for the first time in decades. We'd earned it, paid for it in blood and tears and sacrifice. And we'd come home to a family that loved us, needed us, valued us. Not for what we could provide materially, but for who we were.
On New Year's Eve 2027, we had everyone over: Marcus, Sarah, Sophia, baby Robbie, Sarah's parents, a few close friends. At midnight, we raised glasses and toasted to survival, to family, to second chances, to the unpredictable journey that had brought us here. Sophia was already asleep on the couch, exhausted from excitement. Robbie was nursing while Sarah chatted with Catherine. Marcus stood next to me watching it all, and he said quietly, "Thank you, Dad, for everything, for not giving up on me."
I looked at Robert then, at the man I'd built a life with, fought battles beside, raised a son with, and nearly lost everything alongside. We'd survived because we'd refused to sacrifice our dignity, because we'd known our worth, because we'd loved each other more than we feared being alone. That's the lesson I want Sophia to learn, the one I want Robbie to know: stand for something. Protect what you built. Love fiercely but not foolishly. And family, real family, survives even its darkest moments. Because in the end, we were never fighting against Marcus. We were fighting for him, fighting for the man we knew he could become if he learned that actions have consequences, that respect must be earned, that love without boundaries enables destruction. We fought for our granddaughter's future, for the business we'd built, for our own dignity. And we won. Not against our family, but for it. That's the difference between revenge and redemption. That's what it means to be a power couple who survives together, fights together, and heals together.
So let me tell you what we learned from all of this. Building something, whether it's a business, a relationship, or a life, takes decades of effort. Destroying it takes one bad decision made from pride or greed. We fought like hell to protect what we'd built, and we'd do it again. But we also learned that winning a battle isn't the same as winning a war. We won legally, financially, but the real victory was getting our son back, being part of our grandchildren's lives, building a family that's honest instead of pretty.
If you're in a situation like ours, if your children or loved ones are making choices that hurt you, here's what I want you to remember: you can love someone and still protect yourself. You can forgive someone and still maintain boundaries. You can be kind without being a doormat. We were called cruel, vindictive, harsh, and maybe we were. But we survived. Our business survived. Our family survived. And that's worth more than being liked.
Take care of your parents while they're here. Not because you expect an inheritance, not because society says you should, but because one day you'll be old too. One day you'll have built something you're proud of, and you'll want your children to understand what it cost you. Marcus learned that lesson the hard way, but at least he learned it. Don't wait until you've lost everything to appreciate what you have.
And to anyone who's estranged from their children, who's fighting legal battles with family, who's wondering if reconciliation is even possible, it is. But only if both sides are willing to change, to be honest, to build something new instead of trying to resurrect what died. Our relationship with Marcus isn't what it was before Veronica. It's better. Because it's built on truth instead of assumptions, on respect instead of obligation. We're Robert and Catherine Reynolds. We built an empire, fought for it, nearly lost our family, and found our way back to what matters. We're not perfect, but we're together. And at 76 and 74, looking at our son, our daughter-in-law, our grandchildren, we can honestly say, we did it right. Not perfectly, but right.